Today is Father's Day. Did everyone know that? Father's Day is the one day each year we set aside to honor fatherhood. And fatherhood is an honor, a privilege, and an awesome responsibility. Interestingly, Father's Day came about, though, mostly because we have a Mother's Day. The history of Father's Day is directly linked to the history of Mother's Day. Only seemed fair. If we have a Mother's Day, we should also have a Father's Day, right? While Mother's Day became a national holiday 100 years ago, actually in 1914, so next year we'll celebrate the 100th anniversary of Mother's Day as a national holiday, it wasn't until 1972 that you gents got your day. It took a long time. So why did it take almost 60 years for fathers to get your own holiday? Initially, when fathers started talking about having their own holiday, they were told that every day is Father's Day. Because after all, it is a man's world, right? To understand Father's Day, we need to understand how Mother's Day came into being, because they are linked. Mother's Day actually came into being out of a reality and tradition of patriarchy. Mother's Day was one of the actions or celebrations which came directly from a time when our culture started to examine and reject some of the old practices of patriarchy. Patriarchy, which literally means rule by father, is deeply embedded in Western culture, religion, and tradition. Mother's Day actually has its roots in the days before women could even vote, when women were very much treated as second-class citizens, and in some ways not, but in some ways so. Mother's Day initially was about softening patriarchy and giving women some respect that had been traditionally withheld. Fathers have never been in that situation as a group. Fatherhood has always been held in the highest regard, even to the extent of identifying God as a father. Wow. How many of you think of a father figure when you think of God? How many of you think of a mother figure when you think of God? Okay. Well, we got a little of both, but mostly we have been brought up in this image of God as Father. Us guys have got it made. Most of us, men and women alike, have to some degree accepted God as Father, or as a father-like figure. So does it make sense to have a Father's Day? At first, the answer was mostly no. One early response I mentioned is, well, every day is Father's Day. It is a man's world. Now, those businesses that cater to such holidays weren't really impressed with the suggestion of a Father's Day initially. A florist in the mid-1920s commented that fathers don't have the same sentimental appeal that mothers have. Translated, that means, who's going to buy flowers for Dad? Early objections to the idea of having a Father's Day bubbled up in many different ways. Some were concerned that having a Father's Day would actually serve the cause of patriarchy rather than equality and justice. Others were concerned that having a Father's Day would somehow take away the specialness of Mother's Day. Now, shortly after women received the right to vote, attitudes started to change. And there was a push to combine Father's Day and Mother's Day into a single holiday and rename it Parents' Day. This was the 1920s. So in the 1920s, this movement was started to replace both Mother's and Father's Day with Parents' Day. And it made a lot of sense to some people. And progress was made. Some states even celebrated Parents' Day in the late 1920s. But what happened in the early 1930s? The Depression. Yeah, the Depression arose, and that caused a reevaluation of everything. While those who traditionally benefited commercially from Mother's Day could see no value in Father's Day, others, desperate for business, such as sporting goods suppliers, saw an opportunity to make money. What if we could turn Father's Day into a Christmas for men? They thought. Sure, the florists wouldn't get any benefit, but what about those who make ties, socks, golf clubs, and pipes? As the Depression ran its course, certain merchants started pushing strong against Parents' Day and the creation nationally of Father's Day instead. Make more money off of two holidays than one, they thought. Parents' Day lost favor for a number of reasons, with one of the biggest being a lack of imagination on the part of the business community on how they could commercially exploit such a holiday. Limiting things to just a Mother's Day or a combined Parents' Day was not sufficiently good for business in a consumer economy. So Father's Day became a holiday in some places and an opportunity for humor in others. At no point did Father's Day become as serious as Mother's Day. For example, it was okay to play a practical joke on Father's Day on Dad, wasn't it? It was okay. Not everyone did it, but it was okay. So there were some famous examples of exploding golf ball gifts and a well-placed whoopee cushion. But don't think for a second you can get away with that kind of nonsense on Mother's Day. Mother's Day is very serious. A very serious day to honor mothers, while Father's Day is more lighthearted, even ironic. So here we are today, Father's Day 2013. Fatherhood has changed much since the 1920s and 30s. Talk of combining Mother's and Father's Day into a Parents' Day is starting to heat up again. Most families today are not traditional families with a mother and father. There's no way to avoid that fact. Even when there is a father in the house, images of what a father does will never be the same. Old images of Dad as breadwinner and Mom as stay-at-home parent are being replaced in favor of more diverse images and ideas. A model of a family with a father, mother, and children has changed drastically. We just had a census in 2010, and in 2010 our census showed that about 35%, one-third of all children now live in a single-parent household. And of those single-parent households, about 2/3 are women and 1/3 are men. Although we don't hear that much about the 1/3 that are men, they're there. So how does a family with no father role model celebrate Father's Day? How does a family with no mother role model that's there every day at home celebrate Mother's Day? The original idea for a Parents' Day in the 1920s was abandoned for economic reasons. In today's world, we need to remember that having a Mother and Father's Day leaves out a bunch of kids. Parents' Day is looking a bit more attractive for that reason for some folks. Businesses disagree, but why would any business want to give up 2 present-giving holidays and replace them with just one? Doesn't make business sense. And what about some of our other practices? When a school has a daddy-daughter dance, at least 1/3 of the girls are left out. How do we deal with that? Sometimes even much more than 1/3. More important for us, how does the church reach out to non-traditional families? What's our role? Where do we come into play? Too often, churches point to non-traditional families as the problem to solve, rather than as a way to challenge how we do outreach and how we do ministry. We need to reevaluate that. We need to reach out to all kinds of families. This will be... So how do we stay tuned to a Christian tradition that's mired with patriarchal language and practices in this world of diversity? How do we remake Christianity to be inclusive of these non-traditional families without marginalizing traditional families in the process? Because we still do hold traditional families in very high regard. How do we do that without marginalizing the single family parent, the single parent family? These are difficult questions. And the answers to these questions will change over time, as we have to change over time to meet the needs of the people in our community today, to bring Jesus to where people are now. Symbols of fatherhood that once worked well now often seem to fall a bit short of modern realities. We need to rethink and prayerfully approach God for new ways to communicate God's love in this changing world. In ancient times, faithful people prayed the question, who is God? Who are you? We sense your presence. And they received an answer from God. And the answer they received is, God is like a loving father. That was a good answer in those days. God was not like a loving mother, because in ancient times, mothers were second-class citizens under the rule and control of men. If God is like a father, and you've never met your father, what kind of image does that leave you with? How is that helpful to you in understanding God? How does that help you in your spiritual path? Today, when we do the Lord's Prayer together, let's do it a little differently. Rather than pray our Father as we usually do, let's consider praying our Creator instead. It'll be a bit of an exercise in humility for our fathers in light of this tradition of patriarchy. The words we use make little difference to God. God knows our heart and knows we're referring to God no matter what whether we call God Father or whether we call God Creator. Creator is an ancient alternative symbol for God. This is nothing new, just as Father is. And this concept of God as Creator is nothing new to most of us. In fact, the debate over the exclusive fatherness or the maleness of God has been with us for quite a while, hasn't it? We've talked about it before. The UCC recognized this issue long ago when attempting to bring Jesus to people in relevant ways in our culture today. And discussions have been held along the way on how to deal with all these traditional male images for a God that is beyond maleness and beyond femaleness. And the discussion has made some real impacts. Even our current hymnals have been updated to remove traditional male gender preferences for God. You'll find almost all our hymns, God is presented as either both male and female or as neither. It's not intended to be a slap in the face of tradition, although it can seem that way sometimes. Rather, it's a recognition of the changing nature of society, symbols and imagery, and our loving response to that change. Our response to these challenges is to agree that God is beyond maleness and femaleness. God is beyond motherness and fatherness. And we're looking for ways to adjust our practices, our words, and our songs accordingly. God's love can be experienced either as a loving mom, or as a loving dad, or as a loving gender-neutral presence, depending on your frame of reference and where you're at. For now, it looks like we plan to keep Mother's Day and Father's Day, and that's fine. But let's not forget the difference between a holiday to hold up mothers who have been marginalized and a Father's Day, a day to hold up positive images of fatherhood. without taking away from motherhood. Or single personhood. There's a lot of single people in our culture today. We need to honor them too. It's ironic that with all this fatherly imagery, Jesus himself is never portrayed as a traditional father, but rather as a traveling, homeless, single man. So for all you wonderful single people out there who wonder when we'll add a single person's day to our holiday schedule, all I can say at this point is, talk to Hallmark.